everybody. Dr. Wright here on our first day, April 8th, of Sturgis 2.0, our digital learning. And I wanted to put this video up as an introduction to one of the big themes of our Vergil unit, which we're going to start in translation very soon, and will, of course, be our big topic for your senior year. But heroes, both in epic, like Homer, whom we're going to kind of focus on today, and Vergil, whom we'll focus on for the rest of the time, uh, there's that kind of hero in the epic poetry, the literary representation. But it's important to remember that, especially in the Greek world, heroes also have cult. There is a religious aspect to these ancient Greek heroes that on the Black Sea, near Troy, for example, Achilles received cult and was also thought to be responsible for a lot of the winds in the Hellespont at certain times of year. And we'll see how that same kind of religious dynamic plays out even today. So, heroes we first really encounter in the ancient world, in Gilgamesh, which we talked about in a separate video, but and what's going to concern us, the Greek background to Roman Vergil, in the poetry of Homer. Now, in Homer, the Greeks are most often called Achaeans, and you have various different ones who strive to be the best of the Achaeans, like Agamemnon and his brother Menelaus, the husband of Helen, Nestor, Odysseus, Ajax, and Idomeneus. But we all know the best of the Achaeans is, of course, Achilles. The Iliad is his poem. It's right there in the first line. Sing, goddess of the wrath of Peleus' son Achilles, that destructive wrath. And a key book, and this is the picture right here, is by the Harvard professor Gregory Nagy, called The Best of the Achaeans, Concepts of the Hero in Archaic Greek Poetry. And there's a sort of sequel, expansion, greatest hits version of this based on a course he taught at Harvard for many years called The Ancient Greek Hero in 24 Hours. It will take you more than 24 hours to read that book. It's very long, but despite that length, it's written, for your kind of reading in age level as undergraduates. So, in Homer, what goes into being the best? Well, part of it's fighting, because this is war, and part of it is also speaking. You need to be just as good at speaking as you are at fighting. You need to be able to kill people and then tell a cool story about it to your comrades later. Odysseus, the Odyssey, which we might read, will pop in here to say, well, smarts and tactics in Greek Medea and Metis are also important, because he came up with the idea of the Trojan horse after all. And in parts of the epic tradition and in the Iliad, we see this as force in Greek Bia, represented by Achilles, and smarts, Metis, represented by Odysseus. And these are the central characters of the two Homeric poems, Achilles in the Iliad and Odysseus in the Odyssey. So, in Homeric poetry, how are heroes recognized? Well, it's a war poem, so killing people and being a great warrior is very important. These great heroic deeds get you immediate kudos or glory, and they can also lead to kleos, fame or reputation. But what kleos really means in Homer is that you'll be part of an epic poem someday. So even sort of like what we might call in Star Trek terms the red shirts, the people who die, and a lot of people die in the Iliad, even by dying to these other heroes like Ajax or Achilles, they still get kleos, just a little bit, but they're still in the poem too. Homer will usually tell us this is who their father was, and give them a little kind of biography, but then they're dead. Achilles very explicitly says that if I go home, I will live for a long time, but I will get no kleos. But if I stay at Troy and fight, I'm going to die very young, but I will get immortal kleos. And Achilles ultimately makes the choice, as we know, to fight and die at Troy, and he does get the immortal kleos, the Iliad. If you're a hero, it's more likely that another hero, instead of killing you, unless they're really angry like Achilles, might just take you for ransom and try to make money off of ransoming you back. This happens to a son of Priam Lycaon. He was kidnapped earlier in the Trojan War by Achilles, who sold him for ransom. He eventually made his way back to Troy, and then he made the mistake of running into Achilles after his half brother Hector had killed Achilles' best friend Patroclus. So Achilles was not going to sell him for ransom this time. And even as Lycaon says, "He's just my half brother," Achilles says, "I don't care," and kills him. So, are there rules to Homeric fighting? Well, not running away would be probably the biggest one, but the boasting to your enemy, uh, the one on one duel, and again, the importance of being able to speak well about it later. We will see a great many of these features in the back half of Vergil's Aeneid, including the part that we're going to read in Latin. And that is because the back part of the Aeneid, books 7 through 12, are very explicitly modeled on the Iliad, where the first 6 books are very much modeled on the Odyssey. So I've been talking about speeches and speakers in Homer, and we see here a statue bust of Homer from the ancient world. And the big book on speeches and speakers in Homer, as you can tell by the other picture, is by Gregory Nudge's student, Richard P. Martin, The Language of Hero Speech and Performance in the Iliad. And all of these books I've mentioned are online for free at the Center for Hellenic Studies, chs.harvard.edu. So there are hundreds of speeches in the Homeric poems. There are probably more than 1,000 over the 2 of them, because there's almost 700 just in the Iliad. And I've been stressing that speaking well is a key part of being a hero. Aeneas has to be able to speak well too, especially because he's a leader. So, since Achilles is the best hero in the Iliad, he's the best speaker as well. Nestor is probably 1A. And throughout the Iliad, you can also trace the development of the hero Diomedes as a speaker of words. He is not very good. In fact, he's silent in the beginning of the epic. And as it goes on, Nestor keeps giving him little lessons and pointers. And by the end of the epic, Diomedes can hold his own, with Nestor and Odysseus and Agamemnon, not with Achilles. And Odysseus also has great skill in speaking. He's not going to top Achilles in Achilles' own poem, the Iliad, but Odysseus' skill in speaking gets him through 2 different epic poems, so he's no slouch either. In the Iliad and the Odyssey, and we'll see if this holds true in the Aeneid, there are 3 types of speeches that are labeled muthos, which we said earlier is the root for myth. And I want to simplify our definition of myth from earlier. For right now, let's just say myth is an important story. And we'll see how we can nuance that as we go on. We should start simple. Myth is an important story. In the Iliad and the Odyssey, we'll see again if this holds true in the Aeneid, there are 3 types of muthoi. There's the persuasive speech, or depending on who the ranking king or god, like Zeus or Agamemnon, it might be just a straight command. There's what's called flighting, which is a term we take from Norse saga, which amounts to boasting and provocation, before 2 warriors fight. Good example today, the lead up to any match in the WWE. And then acts of memory. Nestor, of course, is really good at this because he's the old man. He sometimes comes across as Grandpa Simpson, but he is always relying on the memory of his great past deeds, he's very old, which justifies the authority of his speech now. Achilles is both the best at all 3 of these genres of speaking, and he combines them in different ways. He is also the master of the poetic form of the lament that we see throughout, because he's lamenting both Patroclus' death and the knowledge of his own eventual death. So, heroes are primarily in the Greek world, which remember does include Sicily and southern Italy, as we'll see. But to give you an idea, Greece to Troy in Asia Minor, and it's up towards the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara there, where Achilles, as a hero, was thought to have power. Sparta, Menelaus, and Helen, on Ithaca and Cephalonia, Odysseus, at Mycenae, Agamemnon. And it's important to note that as we transition to heroes in cult, their power isn't thought to be all over the world like the gods. It's confined to a local area, and most of the time it's negative. Like Achilles making the winds blow in the Black Sea means you can't sail, ruins trade. Um, let's say you piss off a hero even unintentionally. Oh, the crops fail and there's a plague. You go to Apollo at Delphi, for example, and you ask, what did we do wrong? Well, you pissed off this local hero and you have to render the appropriate sacrifices. A lot of times, again, we hear them in a negative context, but their power has to be respected. And there's still this idea that they helped the Greeks in the real world. In Herodotus, for example, after the Battle of Salamis, where the Greeks defeat the Persians, the Athenian Themistocles is quick to say the gods and heroes helped us with this battle. So Greek heroes receive a different type of worship, chthonic, at different parts of the Greek world. The difference is an Olympian sacrifice. The gods just get thigh bones wrapped in fat and a little bit of the meat, and the people making the sacrifice get everything else. For chthonic or earth underworld deities like Hades, Persephone, or heroes, you have a what's called in Greek a holocaust sacrifice, which just means burning the whole thing. That's what it literally means. Obviously, today, with a capital H, it has a very different context, um, but it gives you an idea why they chose that word for it. So you're burning the entire animal. There's often, in addition, uh, blood, wine, milk, and honey as well. Well, we're going to see a version of this, by the way, in Book 11 of the Odyssey if we get to read it, or you can find it there. So, heroes, again, are very local. They're thought to hold a sort of power over the area where they're buried. And a good ancient text for explaining this, even though it's many, many centuries after Homer, is Philostratus' Heroicus, which is also about Achilles. And you can also find that very good translation of it, also the only one, on the Center for Linux Studies website, where all this stuff is posted for free. And it's not just heroes like Heracles, Achilles, Odysseus, all these people. Even poets like Homer and Archilochus could receive worship in heroic cult. And since a couple of different places claim Homer as their citizen, there are a couple of different places where he is worshipped. And we can see this too. The main point of Achilles' cult is near Troy, because that's where it's thought that he was buried, because that's where he died. But there are other places that claim Achilles' hero cult, or at least we found archaeological traces of it throughout the Greek world. This is an example of what a heroon in Greek, or a structure, a sacred structure to a hero, would look like. Now, appropriate to us, this is not even in Greece. It's in Lavinium in Italy, not very far from Rome. What hero is this structure for? Aeneas. So even he, because remember, he's a character in the Iliad, he gets hero cult as well. So we see this at least getting to Rome, even though hero cult is not a big part or even a huge part at all of Roman religion, certainly not like it is in Greek religion. Instead, you have what might be better described as an ancestor cult. Now, I said that there are some modern parallels to this, and the best way to explain it would be saints in the Catholic Church. So, if you're not Catholic, a saint is someone you can pray to intercede for you with, the Virgin Mary, Jesus, God, whomever. Uh, in the Catholic Church, different saints have different areas of different specialties. So, Saint Isidore of Seville is the patron saint of the internet. Uh, Saint Genesius is the patron saint of theater actors. Saint Jude is the patron saint of lost causes. Uh, things like that. But originally, a lot of saints had more localized powers, we might say, in terms of geography, not in terms of concepts or ideas. And that's because, in a lot of cases, as Christianity spread in the ancient world, it was easier to kind of just take sort of minor gods and heroes, maybe, and just make them into saints. So that brings us to Saint Januarius. Allegedly, the Bishop of Beneventum in the early 4th century AD, so south of Rome, imprisoned and executed during the persecution of Diocletian, and his saintly relic, his blood, liquefies still up to 18 times a year. We'll get to that in a moment. Now, his name looks like January, which is named after the Roman god Janus, god of doorways and terminuses and boundaries. So my suspicion is this guy wasn't actually real. Where does the blood come from? Many questions about the blood. It almost seems like they've just taken a minor Roman god and made him into a patron saint. And his power is very localized. The blood is in the cathedral in Naples. One famous miracle attributed to him is that during the last big eruption of Vesuvius in the Renaissance period, that he was able to stop the flow of lava before it got to Naples and really wreck some stuff. So, the big miracle is that his blood, because every saint has a relic. What's a relic? It's a part of a saint or something that they maybe had or wore. So, in this painting of Saint Januarius, the crozier, he's holding parts of his clothing, just parts of him could count as relics. Last year, a relic of a French saint, Saint Jean de Velay, and I think I've shown you this, some of you, last year, was on a tour. This was a 19th century French saint, and his relic was on a tour of the United States. And his relic, his heart, his actual heart, just in a really, really fancy box that you can see. And you can see him too. His body is on display in the cathedral. And, um, it's thought that these things have some kind of power and that adoration of them and prayer can help you. Um, but again, that power is thought to be localized. Otherwise, why take the relic on tour? Every altar in every Catholic church around the world has some kind of relic in it. In America, they tend to be very, very small, like chips of bone or little bits of cloth. But when you get to Europe and when you get to Rome, you get some pretty gnarly stuff. Sometimes it's the chains of St. Peter at St. Peter in Chains. It also claims to have Christ's baby crib. 12 different churches in the Middle Ages claimed to have Christ's foreskin as their relic. So you can see where in the Middle Ages there's a real market in fake relics. You can also see why even today a lot of Protestants think that Roman Catholics are just kind of secretly pagans. So the blood, it does liquefy again up to 18 times a year, usually at least 3. Sometimes it doesn't, and that usually signals that bad times are ahead. The Neapolitans often respond uh, with a lot of curses towards the saint, which you think would not help the situation. Now, some of you might be thinking, Dr. Ryan, I bet you that blood did not liquefy the last time, because think of what Italy is going through today. But it did. In December, it did liquefy. Um, some people in southern Italy might point that maybe that's why it started in northern Italy, which would lead to our uh, localized saint's power theory here. But we'll see what happens, although things seem to be hopefully leveling off in Italy, we can hope. Now, the reason that heroes are still receiving worship, but they're not fully divine like the gods, is most of them are descended from gods. In many cases, it's just their dad Zeus. In many, many cases. Or in other cases, that Zeus is their granddad or great grandfather. So Odysseus, it doesn't take very long, even in his lineage, to get back to Zeus. Achilles, his mother is a nymph, his father is mortal. There are several sons of Zeus or grandsons of Zeus kicking around in the Iliad. We'll talk more in when we get to the Aeneid about who the different major gods are. I've mentioned Zeus, Apollo, Hercules, Hera, and so forth. And again, these relationships are there is some share of divine power, much more negative on the side of the heroes, but they also get sacrificed, even if it's not the same as the gods. And in many cases, they are related directly to the gods. So the Aristeia is a big moment of glory for a hero. It's the thing that they're going to get their kleos about. It's the thing that they're going to want to speak eloquently about to justify why people should even listen to them. We'll see several of these in the Aeneid on both sides of the conflict. Aeneas will obviously get some, so will Mezentius, Turnus, Pallas, and others. In the Iliad, folks like Diomedes, Agamemnon, Patroclus, Menelaus, and Achilles all have these big moments of glory where they basically, it's like getting the star in Mario Brothers and just going nuts all over the battlefield. Diomedes even wounds gods. Then, and part of why these big moments of glory are important is because a lot of times it's one-on-one fighting from a duel. Its chariots are really only involved to bring heroes to a spot to fight, because usually their first cool move is jumping out of the moving chariot. And it's important to note when we're talking about hero cult, it always presumes that the heroes are dead. It is not that the heroes are immortal, it's that they are dead but still have power in a localized area in the world. And that is because, as I stressed in other videos, if you've watched them, the confrontation with death is the essence of the heroic experience and also for any heroic narrative. And that is true across cultures. It's true in Gilgamesh, as you may have seen. It'll be true in the Aeneid. It's true in Norse saga and epic. It's true in superhero movies. It's Tony Stark's entire arc over 22 movies, uh, or even just in the first Avengers movie. As we said earlier, even those who die at the hands of various heroes still get praise as part of the epic. So here, we don't have to worry about the gods because they can't die. That's because they're gods. This is the death of Sarpedon. Sarpedon is the son of Zeus. He is killed in book 16, 17 of the Iliad. And here we see that Zeus has sent some minor gods in Hermes to take Sarpedon off the battlefield so he can get a proper burial in his home in Lycia. Uh, so even though Sarpedon dies, he gets the kleos in the epic, which includes his dad, Zeus. Again, many heroes. Their dad, Zeus, that's why they're heroes, gets this special treatment from the gods. Achilles' mother, Thetis, will find out in the Odyssey, does the same for her son. The gods also divinely protect the body of Hector from Achilles' abuse at the end of the Iliad. So, if you have questions about heroes or hero cult, especially when we start reading the Aeneid, you should especially bring those up at our Google Meet sessions, but you can also, of course, do that just by email. So it's going to be great to see you guys in a little bit today, and we can get back to work. All right, have a great Wednesday, guys.